philosophy, just famous St. Augustine, Thomas Aquinas, you name them, completely wasted their lives by thinking about non-questions. It's only when...
But that's your belief, Peter.
But there's no evidence for God. It's the basis of that's the core of my belief. That's what we're talking about.
But is that an assumption you're coming to it with, Peter?
Let me say, there is no evidence for God. That is the rock on which I build my system of explanations.
We've had a lot of questions texted in, so we really must get to a few of them. What I'll do is I'll give you both an opportunity to respond to each question, and we'll try and get to as many as we can. I think this is a really interesting one. What new evidence would be sufficient to lead the speakers to adopt the opposite view? So if I perhaps ask that first of you, Peter, is there any kind of evidence that John could bring to bear that would actually make you change your mind and think actually maybe there is a God?
I think that's very interesting. I have asked myself that question previously. Is there any evidence that would flip me into the belief camp and so on? And I simply can't think of any. I think if I tell myself that if I agreed with some evidence, then it showed that I'd simply gone mad.
Right.
So it's a serious question, but I don't think there can be any evidence.
Are you saying your position is unfalsifiable in that sense?
Yes, because even if I was standing, at the foot of a cross and saw the resurrection before my very eyes, I would put it down to hallucination. It's an extension of the David Hume argument, which you didn't quite complete, because Hume went on to say that there is always more reason to disbelieve the reporter than what he is reporting.
Do you want to make a comment firstly on the fact that for Peter there's literally nothing that could convince him that God exists?
I'm very interested in what he said at the end, that he would believe it was a hallucination. And he mentioned to me before that the psychologist would work on what I say, but they'd work on what he said. And one of the evidences for the resurrection of Jesus actually is the work psychologists have done in pointing out that it could not have been a hallucination. He was seen by over 500 people at once, different times of day or night, and all this kind of thing.
But I see in you an example of the power of cultural conditioning that takes place during childhood.
Well, Peter, I could argue the same. You see, the Freudian argument that says the religion is wish fulfillment, it works brilliantly if there is no God. But you see, I would want to argue that if there is a God, Peter's atheism can equally well be explained as wish fulfillment, the desire never to have to encounter God. Richard Feynman, who won the Nobel Prize for Physics, points out that the laws of nature don't come along with rules on what we ought to do with them.
But evolution does, and ethology does, psychology does, philosophy does. And all that these are...
But saying evolution does is no different from saying God does. It's just putting a label on a non-explanation.
I think you can bring to bear the scientific method on to questions about how political decisions
how we should act
emerge.
I suppose it's that age-old thing that very often people say science can build us an atomic bomb.
Yeah.
But it won't tell us whether we should use it. That's something that we have to decide, and the moral questions are different to the scientific
Surely.
aspect. Do you want to comment on that?
No, I just think I would have used that analogy when scientists discovered they had this power. They were faced with a huge moral question, and it's often been debated. And at the simplest level, science, chemistry, I believe, can tell me that if I put arsenic in my granny's tea, it will give her a pretty rough time. But science, chemistry cannot tell me whether I ought to do it or not to get my hands on her money.
So what does tell us? I mean, I have a feeling, Peter, you're going to say, but God's not the one to tell us what we should and shouldn't be doing.
Well, clearly. Since there isn't a God, he's not the one to tell us.
It's been an interesting evening. We are sort of needing to draw things to a close. Are there any final things we'd like to say that we want to sort of round off the evening with before we go our separate ways? Do you want to start, Peter?
Well, science is the way, the truth, and the light.
John, final thoughts.
Science is wonderful. But the God who gives us a world in which science can be done is even more wonderful. And I'm very thankful that it's not an abstract set of intellectual disciplines, but a person who said, I am the way and the truth and the life.